Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 ended on a cliffhanger in the middle of a writer's strike and an actor's strike, but I'm sure that won't mean we'll have to wait all that much longer for Season 3. Those strikes are gonna be settled any day now. I bet it's practically a done deal. Let me just check the latest updates. Oh, fuck! It seems my long-held and widely known faith in the fair minds and generous spirits of Hollywood studio executives has been misplaced. Oh well. If the studios don't want to pay their writers and actors what they deserve for enabling the film and television industry to exist, I hope they stay on strike forever. In the meantime, I've got lots of stuff to make videos about, such as this. My review of perhaps the second to last season of live-action Star Trek ever made, Strange New Worlds Season 2. Going into this season, I was mostly excited, though that excitement was tempered by just a pinch of trepidation. Season 2 had a lot to live up to. I found the first season of Strange New Worlds to be the best Star Trek produced since Deep Space Nine went off the air. It was a perfect season. 10 episodes, not a bad one in the bunch, and a few of them good enough to stand alongside the finest the franchise has ever produced. The second season couldn't possibly be that good, could it? It could. It wasn't, but it could have been. And just because the second season wasn't quite as good as the first, that doesn't mean it was bad. It was good, occasionally great, and most importantly, it showed that the creators of the series were not interested in resting on their laurels after their acclaimed freshman year. They continued to take chances and swing for the fences. Unfortunately, their first swing this year was, well, I wouldn't say it was an outright whiff. They made contact. Definitely not a home run, though. More like a dribbling infield single where the runner beats the throw by half a step. This underwhelming season premiere is titled The Broken Circle. When Captain Pike takes off to find a lawyer for number one, whose court-martial is coming up soon, the Enterprise is left under the temporary command of Spock, who disobeys Starfleet orders and takes the ship to a planet on the border between Federation and Klingon space after receiving an urgent distress call from La'an, who has found evidence that the Broken Circle, a group consisting of Federation and Klingon war veterans, is plotting to provoke another war so they can sell dilithium to both sides and get rich on some sweet, sweet profiteering. Our heroes discover that the Broken Circle have built their own ship, which resembles a Starfleet ship, and are planning to use it to attack Klingons in the system to make them think the Federation has attacked them. Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel wind up captured by the Broken Circle and stuck on the ship. Fortunately, Mbenga has a couple of vials of super soldier serum in his medical bag, which he and Chapel use to hulk up and fight their way through a small army of Klingons before spacing themselves to avoid being blown up when Spock, back on the Enterprise, destroys the ship in order to convince the Klingons that the Federation is not their enemy. Mbenga and Chapel are beamed aboard the Enterprise in the nick of time, and they survive, and Spock convinces the Klingons not to go to war by getting drunk with them. Happy ending! Yay! Oh, wait, there's a quick teaser at the end with Admiral April and some other Starfleet guy who are worried about hostilities breaking out between the Federation and the Gorn. So, other than that ominous hook being dropped, happy ending! Yay! Not a great way to start the season. Definitely my least favorite Strange New Worlds episode to date, which is not to say it's a bad episode, because it's really not. It's just not representative of the show at its best. And ideally, you'd want to put your best foot forward in a season premiere like this. We meet a new character, Pelia, played by Carol Kane, who becomes the Enterprise's new chief engineer. She makes a good first impression, is entertaining and funny, and holds the potential to become a really interesting and memorable character, which is why it's too bad she's barely in the episode. She's introduced and set up in such a way that it seems like she's going to play some important role in the story, and then she just kind of vanishes until she shows back up to chat with Spock at the very end. A disappointing and kinda awkward writing choice there. We also learned something new about Mbenga and Chapel, that they're war veterans. Again, that's a promising revelation. It's particularly interesting to see this side of Mbenga, who seems genuinely haunted by his war experiences. But for much of the episode's runtime, Mbenga and Chapel are reduced to generic action heroes. They get captured by the Broken Circle, taken aboard the fake ship, they dose themselves with super soldier serum, and then they fight. And fight, and fight, and fight, and fight. One endless, slow-mo hallway fight after another. It's not that these fight scenes are poorly choreographed or executed, it's just that they go on and on and on and don't really tell stories in and of themselves, which is something every good fight scene needs to do, especially if it's going to go on for a while. Too often, the fight scenes in The Broken Circle feel like the never-ending fight between Roddy Piper and Keith David in They Live, only with way more characters and way less of a sense of humor. Happily, this underwhelming beginning turns out to be the low point of the season, because things really get rolling with Episode 2, Ad Astra per Aspera, which depicts Number One's court-martial and turns out to be one of the highlights of the show this year. Captain Pike arrives at an Illyrian planet located within a nebula that renders the atmosphere unbreathable to humans, hoping to convince renowned civil rights lawyer Nira Khatul, an old friend of Number One's, to return with him to represent Number One at the hearing. After some initial resistance, Khatul agrees, and what follows is a classic courtroom episode in the finest Star Trek tradition. Is it as good as The Measure of a Man or The Drumhead, the two Star Trek The Next Generation episodes that set the standard for Star Trek courtroom shows? Not quite, but it's close. And it has all the necessary ingredients. Some clever legal maneuvering, a critical examination of the values of Starfleet and the Federation, a climactic, inspiring speech, and a powerfully presented and highly relevant moral issue at its center. Number One stands in the place of every member of a marginalized or disadvantaged group who has ever been persecuted for who they are or where they come from. She represents immigrants and refugees, racial and ethnic and religious minorities, queer people of every stripe, you name it. And the episode, through Nira Khatul, the testimony of our heroes, and Number One herself, argues passionately that she ought to be judged on who she is and what she has done, and that neither she nor anyone else should see their opportunities limited or their rights infringed upon because they belong to an out-group that has done nothing wrong other than exist. The issue is that Number One's people, the Illyrians, practice genetic modification, which the Federation considers a major no-no. Throughout her arguments, Khatul makes the case that while the ban on genetic engineering might have made sense at one point in history, it is irrational and unfair to use it as an excuse for barring people like Number One from service in Starfleet, since she served with great distinction until the truth about her background was revealed. While Khatul fails to convince the panel of judges to overturn the ban on genetically engineered people serving in Starfleet, she does deliver an ingeniously crafted argument from both a legal and a narrative perspective that Number One should be allowed to continue her Starfleet career because in joining Starfleet to escape the persecution she experienced on her homeworld, she fulfilled every requirement of a refugee seeking asylum. It's an argument that explicitly calls upon Starfleet to choose to be its better self, to enforce its policy of protection and inclusion rather than its policy of exclusion. And it works! Now, if only someone would make that argument to the government of the United States about real immigrants and refugees. I'd say we should just show Congress and the Supreme Court this episode, but that probably wouldn't do the trick. Some of those folks are a little thick. The season's hot streak continues in Episode 3, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, one of my two favorite episodes this year, and one of the best episodes the series has done so far, period. Some pre-credits time travel shenanigans land La'an in an alternate reality where James Kirk is captain of the Enterprise. Can you imagine? But Starfleet doesn't exist, and Earth is a wasteland thanks to the Romulans. Luckily, La'an has a gizmo passed to her by a dying time traveler, which, accidentally but fortuitously transports her and Kirk back to 21st century Toronto, where they have the chance to prevent whatever alteration occurred in the timeline. There's so much to love about this episode. It's beautifully executed on multiple levels. The time travel plot is smartly assembled to maximize the tension and drama without feeling too contrived. La'an and Kirk's initial jump to the past occurs accidentally as they're arguing over what to do with the gizmo. So when they arrive in the 21st century, they have no phasers, no tricorders, no civilian clothes, and only the vaguest notion of what they need to do. La'an helps them to shoplift some clothes, Kirk hustles some chess players in the park to get them some cash, and they get a big clue as to what they're supposed to do when a bridge explodes. There's a decent car chase, there's a plot development that involves Pelia in a really clever way that deals La'an and Kirk a reversal before providing them with a bit of unexpected help, and the resolution hangs on La'an having to make a difficult choice that ties deeply into her personal life. It's fantastic. Plus, La'an and Kirk have terrific chemistry. I'm invested in them as a twosome, and Paul Wesley starts to feel more comfortable and at home in the role of Kirk than he did in his previous appearance at the end of the first season. I know technically he's still playing an alternate version of Kirk, not the same Kirk who will go on to captain the Enterprise as seen in Star Trek the original series, but I don't care about that. I care that in this episode he feels like Kirk. His own Kirk. He's not trying to do a Shatner impression, or a Chris Pine impression for that matter. His Kirk. This episode also uses its time travel conceit to do a bit of unnecessary housekeeping to Star Trek's fictional history. Because of the machinations of the time-traveling villains, we're told that the eugenics wars, which were previously said to have occurred in the 1990s, have been delayed by several decades. Khan Noonien Singh, who was an adult, deposed dictator in exile on a frozen spaceship by the 21st century in the history as told in Star Trek the original series, is now only a child in that era, his terrible crimes still in his future. It works well dramatically for this episode because La'an, a member of Khan's extended family who has been haunted by his name and the atrocities associated with it all her life, is faced with the decision of killing or not killing an as yet innocent child in order to determine the fate of the timeline. And that's really all I care about. The timeline alteration to push the eugenics wars further into the future so that Star Trek's history doesn't diverge so significantly from our real history is fine, but like I said, it's unnecessary. It's a made-up TV show in the same universe that began with a made-up TV show from 50 years ago. If its version of the late 20th century doesn't match the real version, that doesn't bother me at all because, in case I haven't mentioned it several times already, it's a made-up TV show. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is followed by Among the Lotus Eaters, another excellent episode that suffers slightly from not being as good as the preceding two episodes or the one that follows it. But hey, these are the kinds of problems you want to have, aren't they? Among the Lotus Eaters is a follow-up of sorts to the original pilot episode of classic Star Trek, The Cage. Not to anything that actually happens in the cage, but to events that we are told about that happened right before the events of the cage. Namely, a mission to the planet Rigel 7 that went sideways and resulted in 3 members of the landing party getting killed and Spock suffering serious injuries. Now, 5 years later, Captain Pike is ordered to take the Enterprise back to Rigel 7 because Starfleet has detected evidence that the native people are using the Starfleet insignia, which suggests cultural contamination, which is a major no-no. Not as major as being genetically modified, apparently, but still something you're really not supposed to do. Pike leads another landing party down to Rigel 7, where they discover that Zach, Pike's yeoman, who was among those presumed killed 5 years ago, is still alive and has gone nuts and made himself king in classic Starfleet fashion. As if this wasn't enough of a problem, it turns out this planet is saturated in a kind of radiation that makes you lose your memory. And not only are Pike and the others in his landing party affected, so is everyone in orbit aboard the Enterprise. How will the crew of the Enterprise be able to rescue Pike if they can't remember that they need to? or even how to operate the ship. It's a well-done show that feels very much like it could have been an episode of classic Trek, and not just because of the references to the cage. It finds new, or at least new-ish, ways of using familiar tropes, something that has become a specialty of Strange New Worlds, and it tells a story that asks us to consider some timeless philosophical questions regarding memory and identity. What makes us who we are? If I can't remember who I am I still me? And if not, who am I? Identity is also at the heart of the next episode, my favorite episode of the season, and this year's designated wacky Spock episode, Charades. Last year we got Spock Amok, a body swap story where Spock and his fiancée T'Pring switch places. This time around, Spock and Nurse Chapel are in a shuttle accident while studying a mysterious space tornado on a moon located on the outskirts of the Vulcan star system, and when Spock wakes up in sickbay after the accident, he discovers he has somehow been transformed from half Vulcan, half human to fully human. And wackiness ensues. Like Spock Amok last year, Charades is primarily a farce. Spock has to pretend to still be a Vulcan because it just so happens he has a very important dinner with T'Pring's parents coming up soon, and if they find out their daughter's fiancé had become a human, of all things, they'd be sure to call off the wedding since they are prejudiced assholes. Or T'Pring's mom is, at least. Her dad seems cool and long-suffering, and really what's a farce without at least one set of mutually miserable, majorly mismatched parents? While Spock, aided by his mom and Captain Pike, scrambles to pull himself together for the big dinner while also struggling to cope with being human, Nurse Chapel, Ortegas, and Uhura return to the space tornado to convince the disembodied aliens who live there, who were responsible for changing Spock, to change him back. The aliens, the Kirkovians, they're called, are a hoot. We meet two of them, one named Blue, the other named Yellow, who appear as identical clouds of swirling blue gas. They're essentially omnipotent customer service reps, calm, confident, and utterly unhelpful. They think they did Spock a favor by sorting out his mixed instructions and rendering him fully human, just like Nurse Chapel, and it takes some doing and an admission by Chapel of her feelings for Spock to convince them to switch him back to the way he was. It's a delightful episode that hits all of its farcical beats just right. Farce is a very formulaic genre, and success relies very much on the execution of the required bits, and Charades, in its writing and direction, and especially the performances of the actors, nails it every single time. Ethan Peck is outstanding as Spock, playing his rapidly shifting emotions from confusion to panic to anger to points in between and beyond, with hilarious and sometimes touching results. And Anson Mount as Pike, very much in a supporting role here, is fabulous. What he does with his silent reaction shots as the dinner runs off the rails is nothing short of brilliant. And in addition to the comedy, it also advances the Spock-Nurse Chapel storyline. After the disastrous dinner, Spock and T'Pring decide to take a break from their relationship, which frees up Spock and Chapel to pursue their feelings for each other. An exploration they begin in earnest in the episode's final shot with a long-awaited kiss. Good for them. I'm sure they'll be very happy together for many, many years. Episode 6 is Lost in Translation, and Uhura Kirk team up. The Enterprise arrives at a nebula to oversee the final stages of the construction of a new deuterium refinery. Uhura begins experiencing vivid and disturbing hallucinations. At the same time, the refinery is sabotaged by a guy who, it turns out, has been hallucinating too. With help from James Kirk, who is around because his ship, the Farragut, is also on hand to help with the refinery construction, and his brother Sam, who is a xenoanthropologist aboard the Enterprise, remember, Uhura figures out that there are life forms from another dimension that have attached themselves to the deuterium molecules in the nebula, and the process of refining the deuterium tortures and kills them. The hallucinations are an attempt by these life forms to communicate their distress. Uhura urges Captain Pike to evacuate the refinery and destroy it, and he does. Strange New Worlds version of Uhura, played by Celia Rose Gooding, is wonderful, and it's nice to see her get an episode to take center stage. Her team up with Kirk is fun. Paul Wesley takes another very solid turn as Kirk, and the episode ends with Uhura, Kirk, and Spock sharing a drink in the lounge, an occasion which includes the first meeting between Kirk and Spock. That moment works, and manages to come across as something other than pandering fan service, though I could have done without the close-up of their significant handshake, but I especially like the way Spock is brought in. Before Spock arrives, it's Uhura and the Kirk brothers hanging out at that table. Then Sam exits after a disagreeable exchange with Jim. Jim apologizes to Uhura, calling his brother frustrating, a sentiment with which Spock agrees as he enters, picks up Sam's empty glass, and places it on the tray of a passing waiter. During Charades, it was established that Sam Kirk is something of a slob, and his habit of not cleaning up after himself is very annoying to Spock. So using that as an in to introduce Spock to this scene where Spock is introduced to James Kirk is a nice piece of writing. Episode 7 is the one I bet a lot of you who regularly watch my stuff and know my general opinions on Star Trek expected me to not like. It's the crossover between Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks, those old scientists. Yeah, I'm sure a whole bunch of you were just waiting for me to shit all over this episode, weren't you? Well, it didn't happen, and it ain't gonna happen, because I like this episode. So there, you think you know me? You cannot begin to comprehend the depth and complexity that is me. Though in all honesty, it's not that deep or complex. I didn't really like the animated segments of the episode. All the things that typically underwhelm or annoy me about Lower Decks were present in those, so But once Ensign Boimler passes through the portal and finds himself in the live-action Strange New Worlds portion of the episode, I thought it was mostly very good. Jack Quaid as Boimler and Tawny Newsome as Ensign Mariner, who eventually joins him aboard the Enterprise, are both excellent, portraying their characters in live action as opposed to animation, specifically the style of animation presented on Lower Decks. I have nothing against animation in general. Enables Quaid and Newsome to show off their comic timing, their chemistry with each other and the other actors in the cast. There are laughs that arise from subtle interplay between characters. There's room for understatement instead of everything being exclaimed in the loudest, broadest way possible. And most importantly, this being a comedic episode, it's funny. There are more laughs in this one episode than there have been in any one entire season of Lower Decks. Some of the most cathartic laughs for me come from Captain Pike, who reacts to the antics of his visitors, especially Boimler, with carefully managed patience, like the responsible but reluctant babysitter of some very poorly behaved kids. But, again, credit where credit is due, Boimler and Mariner are both very funny here, when they're bouncing off each other and when they split up and work with members of the Enterprise crew. Boimler with Spock, Mariner with Uhura and Ortegas. Besides being funny, it's another well-put-together episode plot-wise. Mariner's arrival through the time portal is perfectly timed. They've seemingly got their problem solved, then in she comes to throw a wrench in the whole thing. There are multiple threads that all end up going somewhere and getting sensible, mostly satisfying payoffs. The Lower Decks characters and the Strange New Worlds regulars connect with each other in ways that make sense and feel natural, given what we know about them and the situation at hand. Boimler connects with La'an over the fact that they've both time traveled, and with Pike because they both have knowledge of the future. Pike because of the time crystal he touched a few years ago. Boimler because he's actually from the future. Mariner connects with Uhura because Uhura is a workaholic who can't seem to pull herself away from her duties to relax, while Mariner is pretty much exactly the opposite. The reveal that Boimler is nervous around number 1 because she eventually becomes the literal poster girl for Starfleet recruitment, a poster which Boimler has pinned to the wall by his bunk, treads very close to the sort of mawkish sentimentality that Lower Decks tends to indulge in when it isn't making a pandering continuity reference or having a character yell about something, but it ultimately lands where it needs to. Number one, who was almost drummed out of Starfleet for being who she is at the start of the season, is destined to symbolize the very best of Starfleet. It's sweet, but not in a treacly way, so it works. The next episode, number 8, is Under the Cloak of War, and this one I appreciate for a few reasons. It's an example of long-form storytelling done right. They introduced the fact that M'Benga and Chapel are veterans of the Klingon War in the first episode of this season, and now they come back to that in this episode, which deals with a Klingon general from that war who defected and is now a respected Federation ambassador. When the ambassador, Doc Ra, or Ra as he asks to be called, comes aboard the Enterprise, his presence creates a lot of tension, particularly from M'Benga and Ortegas. Throughout the episode, we get flashbacks to M'Benga and Chapel's service in the war. They were both stationed at a field hospital on Jagal, a moon in disputed territory that was also the site of a Federation colony. The fighting on Jagal was especially brutal, with the Klingons eventually turning their weapons against all non-Klingons, Starfleet and civilian alike. The officer in charge of the Klingon forces on Jagal was General de Graaf, who, as a result of his actions there, is known as the Butcher of Jagal. The depiction of the war is another reason why I appreciate this episode. It's not that we're shown anything we haven't seen before in earlier TV shows or films. The message is one we've heard many times. War is hell. War changes you. War is something you can't understand unless you've been through it. I'm not saying these aren't important messages. They certainly are. But the episode doesn't really find a fresh way of delivering them. What's impressive to me is how real the war feels in this episode. The Federation Klingon War, this war, was supposedly the main subject of the first season of Star Trek Discovery, and not once in any of those 15 episodes did that war feel as real or as important as it does in this one episode of Strange New Worlds. The action of the war itself and the emotional toll it takes on the people who fought in it come through in a very effective way. Much of that is from the production. The scenes on Jagal conjure a plausibly warlike atmosphere. The air is filled with tension. But a lot of it also comes from the performances, particularly Babs Olusanmakun, who invests M'Benga with genuine pain and regret and barely restrained anger. He seems broken, guilt-ridden, but also dangerous. A man who abhors violence, but finds himself pushed to a place where violence starts to feel like the only possible response. Under the Cloak of War is one of the darkest episodes any Star Trek series has ever produced, and its message one of the bleakest. We learn hidden truths about M'Benga and Dakra and their experiences on Jagal and who they are as a result, and ultimately we're told that some experiences are so traumatic, some scars so deep that there's no healing from them. Not fully, anyway. You emerge permanently changed. You can survive, but from then on, there are things you will carry. Like I said earlier, it's not an original theme. It's been explored artfully and memorably before in film, television, and literature. The things they carry just came to mind for some reason. But it is pretty heavy, pretty grim stuff for Star Trek. Which is not to say it's bad, because it's not. Then, as if the tonal shift from the Lower Decks crossover to the gritty, emotionally fraught, morally ambiguous war story wasn't drastic enough, for episode 9, we take another sharp turn from the war story to the musical. Yes, it's the long-rumored, highly anticipated first ever musical episode of a Star Trek show, Subspace Rhapsody. And once again, as with the Lower Decks crossover, this is one that I was predisposed to not like, that I really enjoyed for the most part. I'm not a big fan of musicals, is the thing, in general. Of course, there are exceptions. I loved Hamilton. I'm not made of stone. But as a genre, not my favorite. Yet I liked the musical episode of Strange New Worlds, which just goes to show that our preferences are not necessarily the results of conscious choices. To a certain extent, you have no control over what you like or dislike. Just as you have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story. Subspace Rhapsody is always watchable and occasionally quite clever. I wouldn't call it one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever, or one of the best episodes of Strange New Worlds so far, or even one of the very best episodes of this season, but it's good. The justification for why everyone is suddenly bursting into obviously choreographed and rehearsed song and dance is an inventive bit of technobabble. Basically, at Pelia's suggestion, Uhura transmits a song into a rare subspace anomaly, which causes everyone to temporarily shift into a different quantum reality where everything works like a musical. It's amusing how some characters are kind of into the whole we sing now thing, while others, particularly La'an and Dr. Mbenga, are very, very much not into it at all. And the songs themselves are fine. No earworms, for me at least, your mileage may vary. And with one or two exceptions, they all kind of sound the same, like generic pop rock Broadway sludge. Only, a well-done version of that. I enjoy how Nurse Chapel's big solo number, where she ends her relationship with Spock, and Spock's song, where he expresses his grief over their breakup, share the same melody, but the former is bright and celebratory, while the latter is brooding and melancholy. I also like the wordplay in the lyrics of Spock's version, wherein he describes things in terms of a mathematical calculation and declares himself the X, meaning both the unknown variable and the ex-boyfriend. Number One's first song, a duet with James Kirk, is a welcome departure from the musical style of most of the rest of the episodes, sounding more like a song from a 1950s Broadway musical. And some of these folks can really belt them out, especially Celia Rose Gooding and Christina Chong. Not surprising, since they both have backgrounds in musical theater. Though, despite Chong's fantastic performance, I do think La'an's big number goes on at least a verse and a chorus too long. I get that she's torn up over her feelings for Kirk and she needs to sing about it, but for 4.5 minutes, that's as long as Uhura's big song near the end, and Uhura's is relevant to the plot. Wind it in. That brings us to the 10th and final episode of the season finale, if you will. Hegemony. And speaking of good long-form storytelling, remember that tease at the end of the season premiere about a possible war about to break out with the Gorn? It's just been lying there the whole season. Nobody's touched it. Nobody's even looked at it. Until now, when it's time for the tensions between Starfleet and the Gorn to come to the forefront. Maybe some of you were like, but Steve, how is that good long-form storytelling? They introduced something in episode 1, did 8 episodes about completely different stuff, then came back to the thing they introduced in episode 1 in episode 10. Exactly. You just described an example of good long-form storytelling in a TV series. Drop one shoe, do a bunch of episodes with their own stories to tell, drop the other shoe. It really can be that easy. Which is why it's so frustrating that so many shows fuck it up so badly so often, including Star Trek shows. Yes, I'm talking about you, Disco. I love you, but you can't deny it. Don't blame Saru. It's not his fault. He's perfect. The USS Cayuga, commanded by Captain Marie Battelle, Captain Pike's girlfriend, don't you know, stops at a human colony located just outside Federation space to deliver supplies and make sure everyone's vaccinations are up to date. Nurse Chapel, who has left the Enterprise for her archaeological medicine fellowship, is hitching a ride on the Cayuga, so she's helping out at the colony as well. Then, the Gorn attack. Battelle sends out a distress call, Captain Pike hears it, and the Enterprise races to the colony at top speed. Along the way, Admiral April calls in to warn Pike about the very delicate situation between the Federation and the Gorn. The Gorn have been gathering their forces along the border, and April worries that the smallest little thing could spark an all-out war. The Enterprise arrives on the scene, and our heroes learn that the Gorn have drawn a line of demarcation through this star system, with the colony on their side of the line. Starfleet is honoring the line, which means Pike can't just charge him to the rescue. He has to sneak down to the colony with an away team to figure out what's going on. When they get there, they find the colony mostly empty, with just a small group of survivors, including Captain Battelle, hiding in a diner. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, the rest of the crew searches for a way to disrupt the interference field the Gorn have thrown around the planet so they can beam their people and the colony survivors up as more Gorn ships begin to arrive. So it's a pretty tense situation, told first among 2, then eventually 3 lines. One at the colony, one on the Enterprise, and one on the wreck of the Cayuga, where Nurse Chapel is apparently the only survivor, and where Spock ends up eventually as well. Each group of characters is given difficult and compelling problems to solve. The people on the colony, led by Pike and Batel, want to get off the planet. The people on the Enterprise want to shut down the interference field so they can get their people off the planet, but need to do it in a way that doesn't provoke the Gorn. And Chapel and Spock, once he gets there, want to escape what remains of the Cayuga before it's totally destroyed. Each group of characters and the important characters in those groups have things to do that mean something to the overall story and which feel like natural consequences of the situation in which they find themselves. It's just basic good writing. Then the writers start throwing complications and reversals at the characters. Pike, Batel, and Scotty, yes, that Scotty, who is among the colony survivors, small galaxy, come up with a way to get some of them off the planet, but then Batel reveals she's been implanted with Gorn eggs, which is not gonna go well for her. The crew still aboard the Enterprise come up with a way to take down the Gorn interference field, but it involves destroying what's left of the Cayuga, which is where Chapel is, and then the final and cruelest reversal of all, when the interference field has been knocked out and Pike is back aboard the ship, he orders Spock to have the colonists and the rest of his original landing party, which includes Mbenga, La'an, and Ortegas, beamed up, only to discover that they've already been beamed up by the Gorn. The Gorn open fire on the Enterprise. Members of Pike's crew are in Gorn custody, along with the surviving colonists, and Starfleet is calling in to order Pike to retreat. What's he gonna do? What's he gonna do? We'll find out next year. Or maybe the year after that. Or maybe never. Who knows? Depends on whether or not the short-sighted greed of studio executives destroys the entertainment industry, I guess. I am not a huge fan of cliffhangers, generally speaking. There have been some excellent ones. In Star Trek, the gold standard is still TNG's Best of Both Worlds, and rightly so. However, as a practice, overall, I find them cheap and hackish. There are more artful and elegant ways to entice an audience to come back next time. And everything about the streaming series model, the typical number of episodes, the production schedules, the tendency to do more serialized storytelling, seems best suited to not doing cliffhangers, but instead to treat each individual season as a finished piece in its own right. That doesn't mean its episodes have to be highly serialized or that its season finale has to tie up every single loose plot thread, just that when the credits roll at the end of the season, the viewer is left with a sense of completion, as well as, hopefully, an anticipation for what's next. The first seasons of both Strange New Worlds and Star Trek Prodigy are excellent examples of this. Ongoing plot threads were woven through mostly standalone episodes, and at the end, all the really important stuff gets resolved, with a few loose ends left and maybe some new things teased for the next season. There's clearly a path laid out for stories yet to come, unfinished business, new journeys waiting to be taken, but they don't try to hook the audience by just stopping in the middle of the action and saying, you're going to have to come back if you want to see the rest of it. Having said all of that, it's obvious the creators of Strange New Worlds really wanted to do a season-ending cliffhanger because Best of Both Worlds has become the Montreal screwjob of Star Trek, and every new head of creative seems to be irresistibly compelled to reference it or repeat it or riff on it, no matter how long ago it was. And as season-ending cliffhangers go, this is a very good setup. That final reversal where Pike goes to beam up the rest of his people only to find that the Gorn have captured them is perfectly timed and propels us into that to be continued just the way it needs to. Plus, we're also left hanging with Captain Batel's fate. Is she going to have those Gorn babies? Will she survive? If so, are she and Pike going to co-parent or what? And then, of course, there's that final moment of the episode when Pike is faced with the impossible choice. Does he follow Starfleet's order and withdraw and abandon his people? Or does he stay and try to rescue them, but start an interstellar war in doing so? There are also story threads introduced in this episode that, while not directly part of the cliffhanger, are waiting for some continuation and eventual resolution next season. For example, up until now, the Gorn in Strange New Worlds have been portrayed as scary space monsters. They're like the Borg crossed with the aliens from Alien, aggressive, really hard to kill, and impossible to negotiate with. But this episode plants the seed that perhaps there is hope, that someday the Federation and the Gorn can actually have a relationship based on something other than continuous mutual hostility. When Pike refers to the Gorn as monsters early on, Admiral April cautions him that monster is a word we use to describe what we don't understand. Pike doesn't seem moved by that, but then later on, when La'an notices some of the Gorn juveniles roaming the colony behaving in unexpected ways, Pike starts to wonder if maybe it is possible to reach the Gorn, to communicate rather than fight. It's not in the episode twice for no reason. It's going somewhere. I'm curious to discover where that is, and if I finish an episode or a season with that kind of curiosity about what happens next, that means the creators of the show have done their job. Season 2 of Strange New Worlds is not as good as Season 1, but I'm not complaining. That would be like complaining that last season your best hitter's batting average was 1,000, while this season it was only somewhere in the 900s. That wouldn't make sense. That really wouldn't make sense, actually. If every episode is an at-bat, and there are 10 at-bats per season, then you wouldn't have an average somewhere in the 900s. The next lowest average after a perfect 1,000 would be 900. Then again, using a hit or out model is overly simplistic, given that we're talking about evaluating the quality of a piece of art, not accurately recording an occurrence in a sporting event. Not really sure how I would calculate it to end up with something higher than 900 but lower than 1,000. Even if I did figure something out, it would only be my personal opinion. Anyway, thank God actual baseball statistics aren't determined by people's subjective judgments. The thing I admire the most about this season, and the thing that fills me with optimism about Season 3 whenever we get it, is its willingness, even eagerness, to just go for it, to throw caution to the wind, to try stuff, to risk falling on their faces. This year they did a crossover with another series, an animated series, and they did a musical. Both of those bets paid off. They were good episodes. But even if they had turned out to be rotten episodes, I still would have been glad the creators placed the bets. Audacity is a thrilling quality for a storyteller to have, because it can lead to incredible success or it can lead to indescribable disaster. Give me an audacious but uneven show over one that consistently plays it safe any day. Season 2 of Strange New Worlds is brimming with confidence, developing its characters, challenging its actors, riffing creatively on familiar tropes, and sliding between genres and tones with style and self-assurance. It doesn't quite reach the heights that it hit in Season 1, but it comes close a few times, and it continues to aim higher and higher. It's still the best Star Trek series currently in production, and it's still not close. Steady on, striking writers and actors of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA. Stay strong, hold out, force the studios to give you the deal you deserve, and when that happens, and the cast and crew of Star Trek Strange New Worlds returns for Season 3, I will be ready and waiting, and I know I won't be alone. Well now, This review has been from a zoomed out vantage point, taking in the full season. If you would like to see my review of each individual episode of Strange New Worlds Season 2, you can watch the series I did alongside my best friend and the creator and producer of the Ensign's Log podcast, Jason Harding. This year, Jason and I watched each new episode of Strange New Worlds together, then recorded our takes on the episode as soon as we were done. The playlist of our reviews of all 10 episodes of Strange New Worlds Season 2 is linked in the description, and I invite you to check it out. And if you do, be sure to browse the comment sections so you can see how much people love Jason when he likes the episode we're reviewing, and how much they hate him when he doesn't like the episode. It's pretty funny. If you'd like to support the work I do on this channel, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or become a channel member by clicking the join button, or make a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links for those are in the description. What did you think of Season 2 of Strange New Worlds? Favorite episodes? Least favorites? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading what you have to say. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.